That's the question that really it needs to be answered. Not is gentrification good or bad? It's like what you said. How can those that are being displaced be helped or will ultimately benefit? Welcome to Commercially Speaking, the podcast where my older brother, Bo Barron, CCIM, director and owner of Barron Commercial Group, teaches me, Timmy Barron, ADHD, I'm a SAG-AFTRA actor and comedian. He teaches me everything about commercial real estate. In this particular episode, I thought it'd be fun to take some clips from movies and have his commercial real estate broker's take on it. You will see that I had a difficult time finding any movies about commercial real estate, but it moved into an interesting conversation on gentrification. Neither one of us are experts in it, but I have a very different perspective than Bo does, him having lived in Owensboro, Kentucky for the majority of his life, me having lived the most of my adult life in big cities and being a part of the liberal side of the aisle, and Bo being more on the right side of the aisle. We just got into a very, very interesting thought journey. We both think it's a very, very important conversation to be had. It's a loaded topic, gentrification, and it means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. We are self-aware that we are talking about a topic that neither one of us are really affected by. So that's why we want to hear from you. Enjoy this episode of Commercially Speaking, where we are talking gentrification. I was looking for scenes in movies revolving around commercial real estate, and there's not that many.
Well, you got Glengarry Glen Ross, right? But
right.
They're selling land.
Right.
And they're selling it to people who presumably would like buy the land and build a house on it or something like that. But
yeah,
I don't know that you ever really get a sense whether it's more residential related or commercial related.
Right. But I know that movie, it's more about sales than it is about what they're selling.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. So I sent you a link. It had like 10 clips from movies. And one of them was from It's a Beautiful Life, or It's a Wonderful Life, the classic Christmas with Jimmy Stewart.
That sounded like Dana Carey doing Jimmy Stewart, but
yeah. I think most of my impressions are Dana Carvey doing it.
What did I say, Carey?
You said Dana Carey? Yeah.
Dana Carvey.
Dana Carvey.
Yeah, whatever.
Yeah. Well, she wasn't with us anymore. Yes. Wow. But I sent you that scene because he's talking to pretty much essentially a slumlord, right, of the town that's really doesn't care much for the people. He just wants as much money as possible, right? And that would entail commercial real estate.
I mean, you've got some interesting in TV shows like, CSI Miami. Oftentimes, the bad guy is the commercial real estate developer.
Right.
So I would say popular entertainment generally vilifies the commercial real estate guy.
Right.
But it often doesn't have to do much with the broker. Brokers of commercial real estate are generally caricatured in like a used car salesman type.
Right.
Generally, our job is to bring information.
Right.
And to be able to interpret things like market cycles and some of the things we've talked about in other episodes so that our clients can make really wise decisions on big ticket things, where some people might sell because they don't understand the value and leave a bunch of money on the table. Some people just might make a bad decision and end up in a ditch that costs them millions of dollars. And so the stakes are kind of high with a lot of the deals that we work on.
But you're right. It's always the villain. It's no secret that mainstream media or entertainment does veer to the left, right? So they need a bad guy, a capitalist bad guy.
Right. And a lot of times, corporate America or the rich businessman ends up being portrayed as heartless and,
right.
Slumlord. And there are examples of that. Donald Sterling.
Yeah.
He was an attorney. He ended up owning all these apartments. He was a racist. He was a slumlord. He was kind of the worst of the worst in that kind of caricature of a...
Yeah.
So that does exist. Like,
sure.
That's real life. But I know all kinds of people like our dad who have been very successful and have used his wealth for good over and over. Like, dude's one of the most generous people I've ever met, So I would say that's more normal.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, Hollywood needs a villain, and that's
you're familiar with the musical Rent, I'm sure.
Well, right? I know it exists. I haven't seen it.
Oh, okay. Because I know Autumn's into musicals to an extent, right?
Yeah, I mean, she
loves Wicked.
Loves Wicked.
Yeah.
And I love so much, I can't think of the name of it. We went and saw it in Chicago as a family.
Oh, yeah.
Hamilton. Oh, it was so good. It was so good.
Yeah.
And there's something about music that can just move you, and so like I generally don't want to go see a musical, and I'm almost always glad that I did.
Right.
So I'm like watching people sing and stuff like that. But then it's a moving experience. Like I feel what they want us to feel, and get goosebumps and all that. And I leave thinking that was awesome most of the time. Autumn and I went to New York one time. This is years ago. We went and saw Wicked in New York. It was great. And then the next night we went and saw the show that Idina Menzel was in currently, like then.
Yeah.
Like the one she was actually in.
Not Rent.
And it was something else, and it was not good. Like it was I'll never get those 3 hours back kind of evening. And I forget what it was called, but it was not awesome.
But it was a new one.
It was a new one.
Yeah.
And so most of the time I'll go see one and I'm like, that was incredible. But that I have had one experience where that was not the case.
Yeah, no good. But anyway, in Rent, a lot of it revolves around them wanting to keep their lifestyle I think they're in Brooklyn or something. But you've got these neighborhoods that are starting to be gentrified, right? And it's really going to ruin their way of life. And that is another thing too, is the gentrification of areas. And that has always been, I've always seen that portrayed in such a negative light. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, it has a lot to do with your perspective. I mean, let's just define gentrification in the first place.
Yeah.
Because it's not a term that most people use on a daily basis. But like, how would you define gentrification?
It would be, I guess what my understanding of it is tearing down of what's there to build newer places for people to live that oftentimes are less affordable for those that were already living in the area, and they have to move out.
Here's the Oxford Dictionary definition of gentrification. It's the process whereby the character of a poor urban area is changed by wealthier people moving in, improving housing, and attracting new businesses, typically displacing current inhabitants in the process.
I was spot on.
Yeah, spot on. So, you can think about this from a number of different places, but like perspectives. So let's start from like the people who live in the neighborhood that is being gentrified. Okay. So it's generally a poor urban area. And when it starts to become gentrified, you're having old buildings torn down, new ones
erected.
Built. Nice luxury apartment living maybe, or new businesses. And so there's a general improvement in the real estate in that neighborhood. Like going from poor and old to wealthy and new. Like that is an improvement in one sense. Okay.
Sure.
You have different people. The whole flavor of the neighborhood could change. That's probably a big theme in Rent. Just their whole lifestyle and the whole character of the neighborhood changes. They're probably lamenting that. Not only does their world look a little different now in their neighborhood, what they experience on a day-to-day basis, but all the property values start to increase. And what happens when the property values increase is their property taxes increase. And so you might have somebody, let's just say, had a home that was worth $100,000, and 10 years later, it's worth $1 million. And now they can't afford to pay the property taxes on it, and they're forced to move. Let's say I'm a wealthy person coming into one of these gentrifying neighborhoods. I can't just point to that house over there, force those people to move, and then redevelop that into some, 5-story luxury condos or whatever. What happens is, as some of these properties start to develop and redevelop, all the property values start to go up, including that little house right there. And when they can't afford it anymore, I might swoop in, buy it from them. they sell with a tear in their eye because they've lost the house that all their kids grew up in and that they never wanted to leave. And now from no fault of their own, they can't afford it anymore. So that's from that perspective, that's a sad scenario. And so many people who have felt the effects of gentrification, the folks that lived there before it happened, have a negative outlook on the whole process of gentrification. Now, if you're the city government, you might have a whole nother take on that. All of a sudden, all these properties that weren't worth much have been redeveloped. Now they're worth a lot more. You've increased your tax base for your city. So your city is now more flush and can do and provide services for the good of everybody in the community. Now that's a good thing from that perspective. A lot of times crime will go down. So in a poor urban neighborhood, there might be less opportunity for a lot of folks, which can lead to crime.
Sure.
So as it gentrifies and becomes more valuable, and a lot of times crime will decrease. Well, that's generally a good thing. If you're a developer, that's an opportunity to go in and create something new for people who want it or are willing to pay, and you can make a profit. That's not a bad thing in and of itself. So from a developer's perspective, that can be good. If you're a commercial real estate broker, a gentrifying neighborhood is going to have a lot of turnover, which means a lot of transactions, a high velocity of transactions, which is what a commercial real estate broker loves. That's deal flow.
Yeah.
A lot of opportunities. So that's generally a good thing. So it really just depends on your perspective.
Sure.
If you take any neighborhood over a long enough period of time, it's going to change.
Right.
It may not look like what we think of in gentrification, but there's going to be change.
Sure.
Anytime that happens, there's winners and losers. And so I think it really comes down to your perspective when you look at gentrification.
Yeah. I wonder if there's
where Beamer has his Airbnbs in Nashville. It's a neighborhood called The Nations, and that's a gentrifying neighborhood. Like when you go through that area, you can see like the properties that he owns are newer, and just a handful of years old. And on the same block, you see houses that are much, much older, and like every third one has been torn down and rebuilt. And so you've got this eclectic mix of different properties, and across the street there's a body shop, for automobiles, and but then right down the block you've got a really cool new restaurant, and it's hip and cool and it's on the come, and so there's a lot of excitement. There's a vibe to that neighborhood. It's just cool and young, but the people who lived there 20 years ago probably don't love it at all. From their perspective, they're losing what they had.
Sure.
And probably can't afford.
Right. So they feel like they're being pushed out.
Well, they are.
They are, essentially.
Pushed out by market forces more than any evil developer pushing them out.
Yeah.
It's really just the market forces of supply and demand.
Yeah. I wish I knew more about this. It's just crazy. There's so many viewpoints on so many different issues. It's hard to find the truth in some things. Like I'm thinking about the systematic racism that comes with gentrification, right? What about that
you mean
is true?
Systemic?
Yeah, systemic.
That's actually a different word, I think.
Yeah. What did I say?
Systematic.
Systemic racism. You're right. Yes. And how especially being in Chicago, how most of those neighborhoods, the people that are misplaced, is that the word that was used in the Oxford?
Displaced.
Displaced. Does gentrifying a neighborhood help them in any way? Or does it continue to kick the can down the road? Do you understand what I'm like?
I do. I don't know if I have an answer to it.
Yeah.
If you just look at the economic system that we have, market forces dictate a lot of this stuff. And gentrification is not systemically racist or not. It's poor to wealthy.
Yeah.
And if you look at what poor neighborhoods generally look like, then I can see how somebody might take that and think, well, this is systemically racist.
Yeah. I think it goes back to like redlining too.
Well, yeah, that's a whole different ball game.
Seems like it all bleeds together in some way, but anyway.
I don't think redlining and gentrification are the same thing.
No,
or
it wouldn't
even
be.
cousins. But on the other hand, I hadn't really thought a whole lot about this.
Because redlining could isolate these certain neighborhoods that are poor neighborhoods, ultimately down the line could be gentrified. And so the minorities that we see in this neighborhood are there because of decades ago decisions like redlining and stuff like that.
That could be true.
You know? Mm-hmm. So that was the connection I was making, or the bleed through that I was kind of, like now, no, it all bleeds together some way, shape, or form, and everybody's got an opinion or a thought or a strong conviction towards a certain truth that they see, I guess.
I bet if you looked at gentrified neighborhoods that have gone through the process of gentrification, my guess is those are generally minority neighborhoods that became very white.
Right. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, gentrification in and of itself isn't racist or not.
Right. It's poor to
It's
wealthy.
just the process of the change of a neighborhood from poor to wealthy.
Right.
If you oversimplify.
Right.
And it's an interesting question. I don't know the answer to it. I think gentrification is, I don't know. I don't even know what I was going to say.
Yeah. It's tough.
Yeah, but it's, I almost think of it as like a brick.
Uh-huh.
A brick could be used to build. Mm-hmm. It can be used to inflict pain. Mm-hmm. The brick in and of itself is not good or bad. It's how it's used.
Sure.
And gentrification in and of itself, it's, there's never like a committee of rich, evil white people who say, all right, let's gentrify that neighborhood now. Let's go after it.
Yeah.
And let's kick all the minorities out and let's make us some money. It doesn't go down like it's an organic thing where there's some kind of tipping point, and now it makes sense to, there's an opportunity.
Right.
Okay. Somebody needed to sell for whatever reason. There's an opportunity there. Maybe it's on the fringe of the neighborhood close, and they think, man, I bet we could do something cool there. And so they do it, and that kind of catches on, and it starts to spread through the neighborhood.
Sure.
It's an organic thing. It's not a,
Right. It's not a decision to...
The evil gray-haired white guys that are saying, all right, let's go get that neighborhood.
Yeah.
Now,
Let's push it. Right. It's got to happen at some point. I mean, it's all about making improvements and to the community and...
Yeah, and if you think about any particular property in a poor neighborhood or a wealthy one, like fast forward 150 years in the future, and like those buildings aren't going to be there. Like they have but they have an actual limited life. Those buildings will, like if you do nothing to those neighborhoods, eventually those buildings fall over.
Right.
Eventually.
Right.
And so something will be done at some point in the future. And change creates good opportunities and also reveals problems at the same time. So anytime you have change in a neighborhood, you'll have both the good and the bad.
Right.
I think the question would be, if I were in city government, or if I were a local church, or if I just had a heart for a particular community and I had the means, what could we do for the people who are being displaced? It's not that gentrification is necessarily good or bad. It's how do we not leave these people
right? How are they benefiting from?
Or how can we care for them in some way, or how can we provide opportunity for them in some way? Or,
right. That's funny because as you were saying, that's the question. That's the question I was writing down.
Yeah,
like that's the question that really it needs to be answered. And I think that when you are able to remove all these factors that certain people hold so passionately strong to really find what is the question, which is not is gentrification good or bad? It's like what you said, how can those that are being displaced be helped or will ultimately benefit from the community benefiting from the growth that can come with gentrification?
Yeah, and I don't have the answer to that.
Right.
But a lot of times when it comes down to it is, I like the idea of providing opportunities for people who have to then make a decision to take advantage of those opportunities.
Yeah.
As opposed to,
Be handed something?
Not even that, but just crying victim, but not being willing to take advantage of opportunities, you know?
Mm-hmm.
But
Yeah.
like I said, I hadn't thought a whole lot about this. I mean, we live in a small community that really hasn't changed a whole lot.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know that we've got communities in Owensboro that we could call gentrified.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
It's not.
Right.
Generally, this is kind of big city. Like we've seen this in Brooklyn. It's been gentrified. Boston, like South Boston, like back in Good Will Hunting, you know, Southie and all that.
Yeah.
Like that's been completely gentrified.
Wow.
You know, there's neighborhoods in Chicago and
Yeah.
and other places in these bigger cities. So I haven't lived in it,
Right.
or
right.
around it.
Right. That's a good point. Because it does, like everything I think about when I think about that is in the cities I have lived in. You know, Memphis, Nashville,
Sure.
Chicago, of course, New York. I haven't lived there, but
Not yet.
Not yet.
Well, recently, Maddie, my daughter, asked me if she could have my Audible password. And I was like, yes, you may. So she logs into Audible and buys the first Hunger Games book. Mm-hmm. And I'm thinking, oh, she's seen the movies. And we actually watched some of the movies together, me and her in Autumn, this weekend.
Oh, nice.
Rainy outside, got cold. We built a fire, watched some movies. I got to sit around on the couch with my two favorite ladies.
Oh, that's the best, yeah.
But there's this new Hunger Games, like a prequel coming out movie. Mm-hmm. And so I have read those books and I saw those movies. I did the same thing with the Divergent books and movies too. Mm-hmm. Autumn, she wrote me in on this one with Divergent. You know the Divergent movies?
No. I mean, I know of them.
Well, they're this like Hunger Games. They're almost written to teenage girls. Mm-hmm. I don't know who it was that was a baby. It was either Ben or Maddie. We're in our house on Bryant Court. I'm in bed. One of the babies gets up or wakes up, and Autumn goes to, I don't know, feed, change diaper, or whatever the case may be. And so I don't think I'd already fallen asleep. I think I was just laying there. And so I look over at her bedside table, and that Divergent book was there. And I was like, all right, whatever. And I grabbed it and started reading it just to whatever.
Right.
And like it hooked me from the jump.
Wow.
And I read all the books. Wow. And I think it either started with Hunger Games and went to Divergent, or it went the other way around. But I think, man, I like this teenage girl fiction. This is really good. And so I read all those books. And now that there's a new one, I'm listening actually to the new one that's about to come out in this movie. And this has a point. The President Snow in the Hunger Games is this old, mean, Kiefer Sutherland's dad, Donald. He's this nasty guy. But in the prequel, he's an 18-year-old senior in high school, essentially. And the war had ended, and his family was broke and hiding it. Like their old money wealth of the capital, and they're hiding it. And they pass a law that starts to require property taxes to be paid on capital properties, which hadn't been the case before.
Right.
And so their part of the conflict at the beginning is this Snow character being able to continue to hide the fact that they can hardly afford enough food to eat, but maintaining the facade that they're still wealthy.
Right.
And when they heard about that law being passed, their thought was, we're gonna lose our place. It's not exactly gentrification.
Sure.
But when we were talking about that, I was like, it's kind of that whole, like, they could be forced because of law, because of market forces to leave, the place they'd lived in for generations or whatever.
Right.
And it was, sometimes there's not an evil guy to point to that caused that.
Right.
It's just somebody passes a law, somebody changes property taxes the way they're done or how much they are or whatever, or property values just go up because of market forces, and you're in a situation that you all of a sudden can't afford, and you're not sure why.
Yeah.
And you can probably feel like a victim. You know, nothing I did caused this to happen to me. True statement. You know, and it's got to be a tough situation, a sad situation for a lot of people.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah. Well, thanks for indulging. What was it? Thanks for going with me on this little journey, little thought journey. Thank you for tuning in to Commercially Speaking. Please, if you haven't yet, hit that subscribe button, like, share. That helps in this world. If you're listening on a podcast platform, any and all reviews that you write do nothing but help us get everything that we're talking about into the right ears, into the right people. So we'll see you next week.